Hey guys, Warren Williams here. My website is warrenwilliamscoaching.com. So today, hopefully I'm going to get a full recording out. The last few times I tried to record on the webcams, for some reason it would stop like 2 minutes early. So I'm hoping that this time this will go through without any problems. Today I'm going to talk about functional training versus machine training, but in the respect of the functional carryover that is needed for sport. So what I'm saying here is you've got a lot of athletes that perform well in spite of their exercise program, not because of their exercise program. So a lot of the times they're training on machines, but because of the nature of their genetics, they're able to perform brilliantly in their sport, but not because of the training that they do their base conditioning. You get a lot of athletes that sit down and do a chest press exercise, but you show me one sport where you're required to sit down and push. There isn't a sport that requires that. So that functional exercise component is lacking in their training routine. Show me one sport where you're sitting down, just doing arm curls. You know, the only thing that could even come close to something like that would be rowing, where you're seated in a boat and you're actually creating a pull action. But that's the only thing that's even kind of related to that. But even then, you have to have the ocean. So you're getting a movement of the ocean as well as a forward lean and a slightly backward lean as you pull the arms in. So even then, it's not specifically related to it. But that would be the only thing that I could even give you as an example that's kind of related to that. But then if you think about, give yourself a scenario now. You're a personal trainer and you train people just on machines. And then you get a top level skier who comes to you and says, "Oh, I want to, want to get in conditioning, some form of base conditioning for my skiing." And then you just put them on a machine and say, right, we're going to do some arm curls on this machine, and then we're going to do a Smith machine squat, and then we're going to do some back extensions. It's like the skier. If you were to watch a video of the skier performing these incredible tricks, like on one leg or flipping over, horizontal, sideways, turning 360 degrees, you know, dodging in and out of cones or whatever. Um, and then you cut to another video of the way the guy trains, sitting down on a machine doing basic arm curls, um, then seated chest press, seated shoulder press, and you kind of put the two together. It's like, well, hold on, this guy on his skiing is doing incredible, um, demanding movement patterns that his nervous system is working at its highest level to be able to achieve, and then cut to the other video, and then you see a guy who's just, his muscles are just bored because he's doing a really basic pattern of movement. It's like it has nothing to do with what their body demand is requiring. If you're training in a sport that demands high levels of neurological stimuli, it means that what you're doing in your training should also equal the same. I come from like a martial arts and boxing background, and there's a saying that they have in martial arts and boxing, and that saying is, the more you sweat in the gym, the less you bleed in the ring. And what they're trying to say is, if you make your training so hard that it's harder than what you can face in the ring, then what the ring is, it's almost easy compared to what you're doing in your training camp. So if that rule applies, then shouldn't it be the same for everything else? What you do in your sport should be mimicked by your conditioning program. Otherwise, what's the point of doing it? What's the point of looking good but not being functional in your training programs? So, as the saying goes, um, ability is what you're born with, but skill is what you acquire. So, people are born with a specific level of abilities. Some people are more naturally proficient at balance, they're just naturally good at balance. Some people are born naturally, like, as they say in boxing, some people are just a natural banger, they can naturally hit quite hard. Doesn't mean you can't train to improve those levels, but what it means is they have that natural ability. And then you acquire skills through practice. But what's the point of training your body to do basic patterns of movement that have nothing to do with your sport? I'll give you another example. You got a lot of people like that do a lot of what we call abdominal conditioning, lying on their backs to do sit-ups, but yet The only time they're really using your abdominals, the only time you need support anyway, is not on your back. You need abdominal support when you're standing. So if you need abdominal support when you're standing, why do people only do abdominal conditioning laying on their back? When you're on your back, you do not need any support. You are on your back. You need support to prevent you from falling on your back, not just laying on your back. So it's like, why do you see all these people that are just doing abdominal conditioning on the ground? If you only ever do conditioning on the ground, when you stand, your brain's like, okay, what do I need to do now? Because you haven't trained that pattern of conditioning into their mindset. So anything you do in sport, you should be doing in your conditioning program. So if you're a tennis player, you're integrating your arms and legs every single time you serve, every single time you do a forehand or a backhand. You're integrating your trunk as one unit. You don't separate the arms from the legs. So why is it we do this in our conditioning programs? Why do we sit down and just do leg press and separate the legs from the arms, and then sit down and do shoulder press and separate our shoulders from our abdominal wall? Why do we do this in our base conditioning when our bodies tell us that that's not the way it works? When we walk, you have counter rotation of the arms and legs working through the trunk. So that's an integrated approach just from there. You look at a baby when it crawls. A baby crawls using its arms and legs and its trunk. The reason why a baby can't sit up, once it's like 2 months old, is because the abdominal wall isn't strong enough yet. So they learn through patterns of crawling on their chest, then being able to crawl on all fours, which are called reptilian crawl, moving on to a mammalian crawl. And then you got being able to stand, get into a lunge position, and then from there they can start walking. So these are all patterns that are integrated into our mindset, into our physiology, to be able to allow us to be able to work every single pattern of movement in a functional plane, whether it's transverse, rotational, or coronal, side to side, or sagittal, which is front to back. So you've got transverse, rotational, coronal, side to side, and sagittal, front and back. All these three planes of movement need to be worked on in order for us to be able to be proficient at our sports. It is up to the conditioner to study the movement patterns of the sport that you are doing and make sure that the training correlates with those patterns of movement, so that you're actually training yourself in those patterns of movement, so that those patterns of movement are more proficient. So another example would be a boxer. When they throw punches from a lunge position with their legs. So one leg's in front of the other, and then their arm is pushing. So, and then they're getting rotational through their trunk. So what you've got there, you've got three patterns of distinct movement. You've got lunges, you've got twisting, and you've got pushing. So in that sense, you need to be able to make sure that their lunge pattern is strong. You need to make sure their rotational pattern is strong through their trunk. And you need to make sure their single arm push pattern is strong. Boxers don't punch with, two fists at the same time. They need to be able to punch with one fist at one time, integrating the trunk into a lunge position. So a good example of this would be cable, like a single cable machine from a standing position, doing a single cable push in a lunge position, which would be specific to the movements that they do in their sport. And you want to make sure that you're integrating the whole trunk, because that's what they do when they box. What's the point of making them do seated arm curls? Because they don't do that in their sport. So everything we're doing has to correlate with the sport, and to train the person specifically to be able to be proficient in their sport by mimicking the patterns that they do in their sport. Otherwise, what's the point? What's the point of developing strength that can only be used on a machine, when that's not what you're going to be doing in your sport in the first place? So I just wanted to get that out, just to give you a quick example. When you're conditioning people, make sure it specifically correlates to their sport to make the person proficient in their sport. There are obviously more things that are required, such as nutrition, posture, their breathing, their balance, and so on. But that's just the specifics on training people in relation to their sport. Warren Williams, thank you very much.